Winning Plays Podcast is back yet again, and the Celtics winning streak has come to, I guess, an uneventful end on Monday night in Chicago. A pretty start to finish loss against the Bulls, the one team, along with the Cleveland Cavaliers, that appear to have the Celtics number there, unlike the rest of the NBA. My name is Brian Robb, joined today by frequent guest on the Winning Plays Pod and co-host Souichi Terada, also of MassLive.com. Make sure you're following Souichi on Twitter at Souichi Terada, Terada, to follow his red hot Japan World Cup takes that will be coming in over the rest of the week here. Souichi, we have to start there. What are the nerves like going into Japan opens up tomorrow? What are the nerves here?
Very nervous. The last time they played, they blew a 2-0 lead, and I was an intern in the newsroom in Nashville, the Tennessee, and everyone was just not making fun of me, but everyone was very sad for me. So I'm ready. I'm ready for this. I think it's been 4 years. One pandemic later, they play at 5 a.m. against Costa Rica one of the days. So I don't know what I'm going to do for that day. Well, that's
a DVR day. That's a DVR day. But the Celtics do play Wednesday night at the Garden after the Japan plays. So we want to win here, so you don't have to take that punishment like you got in Tennessee.
That's true. That is very true.
But yeah. So let's start here. We're going to look ahead, but we're going to start by looking behind in terms of what the Celtics did in this 9-game winning streak, which before it came to an end here on Monday night. And I guess I'll just start here of like, what's your biggest takeaway from this streak as a whole? I mean, there are a couple kind of not improbable wins, a couple of impressive come from behind wins, but it was more just a kind of a TCB, if you will, a taking care of business type winning streak where the Celtics just, had their way pretty commandingly, obviously offensively against a lot of these teams. And then against the Bulls team last night, I don't know whether it was just taking the foot off the gas defensively or just, a slow scoring start, but it obviously wasn't enough to get number 10.
Number one takeaway, I think I've mentioned this a few times, is the clutch wins. Remember last year, like we talked at length over and over again about how bad this team was closing games and the clutch record and all those things. Celtics are now 6-2 in clutch games following this win streak. And I think, last night's loss to Chicago did not affect the clutch games, obviously, since it was, I think the closest was an 8-point margin in the fourth quarter. So that didn't register. And I just thought the clutch, they just kept pulling it out against, close games, like against the Bulls to start it off, against the Grizzlies on the road. They did it against the Thunder at home, even though they looked horrible that entire night. And over and over again, I thought that was probably the most impressive part, just because 6-2, and I think I kept saying this last year, B-Rob, no matter what the encore product show, but there's always a little bit of finickiness when it comes to close games. Like most teams hover around the 5-point mark because there is a little bit of a luck factor into it, but I think you feel pretty good about how those clutch games have gone. I think it's pretty, if you bring it up, I think people have brought it up to Joe and Jason, and their biggest takeaway is they've been good in clutch games so far, or it's you guys haven't struggled yet, one of those deals. So I think they have kind of a healthy mindset of it. But like you said, I think it's taking care of business. One thing I was kind of a little not shocked by, but maybe a little amused by, was just like you wrote a Mass Live today, like Joe Mazzulla's like minutes distribution in terms of like playing these guys. Like Al Horford played a lot of minutes yesterday against the Bulls. Jason Tatum played 40 plus minutes against the Pistons on that kind of a back-to-back on in a road game. And maybe it is just, I'm obviously still early to just be like, hey, this is like a problem. Like you shouldn't be playing your guys this much. Maybe it is very much so. I think I mentioned this to you, B-Rob, like maybe it's play them a lot now and rest them in March/April ahead of the playoffs. But I thought that's just something kind of worth noting, I think. And maybe, I'm totally okay with that in the sense of like, you saw what the Celtics were like just to begin last season in terms of 18 and 21. Look, the vibes are just completely off. They looked horrible. I think there is something to starting the season off strong and like fixing the vibes, especially post Ime scandal and suspension and everything. Like you got, the number one team in the league. You still have the best record in the league at 13-4, half game ahead of the Bucks. Like I think that means a lot to make sure like things are good. Like you could be the Warriors and take forever to win a road game coming off the finals. Like there's that end of the spectrum, and there's the Celtics end of the spectrum. So I'm okay playing all these guys. I thought that was kind of just amusing. Obviously with Al, that's a little bit different because he's 36. But I think those two things kind of stuck out to me, and in terms of just winning those games, like there were a few times I thought the winning streak was going to come to an end, but they just kept winning. Like the Thunder game really especially comes to mind. I was talking to Corrales at that game, and I was like, yo, I think they're going to lose finally. And then they pulled it off. And you got to do that when you're when you're trying to be the best team, the best record in the league. And so far, all things considered, like the Celtics obviously look great. Like there's very little to nitpick against, losses against Central Division teams. I think someone tweeted that Celtics struggle against the Central Division, which I don't think you want because the Bucks are in that division. But we'll see how those games go in the future.
Yeah, two things there. First, I think it was a great point on the clutch stuff, especially the way the Celtics started this season. Like 4-3 with a couple of like ugly finishes against the Cavs there, who we know now are a good team, but still that was, the turnover of last season and points to the playoffs. For them to come through with both comeback performances and holding off, comebacks, and whether it's the Pistons or against the Bulls earlier in the win streak, that's big. The minute stuff, and some people are getting mad about this. Like, let me be clear here. Joe Mazzulla is doing a great job. If this is the big, like you said, if this is the biggest problem the Celtics have here, it's like they're playing guys a little bit too much to start the season while having the best record to start the year. Like that's a good problem to have when you compare it to the Warriors of the world, or even look at the Heat right now, or just other teams that are just like kind of in shambles that were in that Final Four last year. With that said, the Celtics have a pretty deep team here, and they have, they clearly have this. Horford in particular, they're resting him on the back-to-backs. That's good, but that should be the case regardless. But the fact that he's playing more than he has since like 2017 right now, when he doesn't have the luxury of a half a season off in OKC, that's a problem. Because for me, it's a couple of standpoints. A, like Luke Cornett, Blake Griffin, like backup center Poo Platter, like they've been okay. Like they're not gonna keep you from winning these games by and large. Some of them have had their moments. You can kind of, rotate who you like in that group based on the matchup that night. So that's number one. And number two, it's just like Horford is just way too important to this team. Or like if any, for like an injury or just wearing him down, like it's just there's no way to kind of replace what he offers there. And from that standpoint, it's like, well, I don't know why you're like chasing wins against the Bulls in like November when you're down by double digits and Horford's like 0 of 7 to start the night or something like that.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like I found it kind of amusing to start the season. Al got those questions about whether he was going to play back-to-backs.
Yeah.
And then it was like, I plan to, and obviously he hasn't yet. I just, and I remember
strategic answers.
Yeah, right. Like I remember asking Al at the end of last season, like, hey man, how you feeling? Like you're old, like you haven't done this whole NBA long, like a full NBA season in at least a few years because of OKC, but also the pandemic, affected everything, et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, yeah, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, Al, like you should probably rest, man. Like, like I know you're a competitive dude and everything, but it's just good. It's just better to be safe than sorry. And I think it's a good distinction you made, Rob, in terms of like, you can play these guys heavy minutes. Like Jason Tatum, once again, is 24 years old. Doesn't turn 25 until March, I think. Like he's fine playing 40 minutes on the back end.
He wants to play more,
especially
probably.
He is okay. Yeah, exactly. Like this dude clearly takes care of his body, right? Like I think that's something that we can all, his trainer, Nick Saying, is always with him, basically making sure he's fine. So he's fine, but like Al Horford is probably a guy that, like you said, is just too important. Like I think Al might be like in terms of like X factor, like he might be the guy. Like obviously if Jason or Jalen goes down, that's one thing. But like if Al goes down, like you just can't replace that production. And that starting lineup with Rob, as everyone saw last year, like that's like completely, like I think the offense might not be league historic best levels, I think, just because of like, the spacing right now is great. But I think with Rob back, like you're back into the discussion of like one of the best defenses like in the league, maybe flirting with ever, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think Al is such a big part of that and being able to go over the big man and everything. So, but yeah, like you said, Joe Mazzulla is doing a great job. League best record, second best offense now. I'm sure we'll get into that. But the defense slipped against the Bulls, but it keeps improving. I wrote about that last week. So all things considered, like there's the fact that we have to talk about minutes distribution when other teams, like you said, like the Warriors and Heat and the Lakers, all these teams are having these god awful seasons. The Celtics are, they're riding high. And like I said, I think that's super important post Ime because B-Rob, like if they started slow, can you imagine if they started like 9-7 or something, which would be fine. Like they're probably going to have a 9-7 stretch in the middle of the year. Like it's an 82 game schedule. Like that happens, right? Like, but if they started that, I think there would be a lot of doubters about Joe, about the Celtics. Instead, they came out this 9-game win streak, looking like the best team in the league, and I think that's so important for the vibes. And you know, if the vibes are that good and it takes playing Tatum an extra 5 minutes, I think everyone will be happy, including Jason Tatum. So.
Right, and I want to give credit to, and I want to on Joe's defense here on that front too. It's like this is a new team, and what's a good way to like build capital if your players like, okay, yep, I'm not gonna like, you guys want to go for the 10-game win streak, go for it. I'm not gonna like not play you enough if you still think you have a chance in this game. And again, that speaks to like the Tatum and the Brown part of it. And those guys, Tatum is 4th in the league in minutes. Brown is career high for minutes. But that's, to me, like from that part of it, that's worth it in terms of like if that's building that trust with that group. And guys, like you said, if Joe is coaching for his job here too, like indirectly. And so 13-4 start versus a 9-7 start. Yeah, if we got to play guys a couple extra minutes to get that, and like make sure everyone knows that I'm the right guy for this job. Like, guess what? I can't fault Joe for that either. So over an 82 game grind, that will be a situation where I'm sure it'll level itself out. I do think it's a situation too where Missoula might be thinking, hey, if Robb is looking good, if Robb's gonna be back in a few weeks, guess what? We'll have plenty of time to rest Al. Like assuming that, and that's a lot of what ifs here. If you know what is Rob Williams' minutes load going to be like? And let's talk about him for a second here. Like, so the latest reports is he's up to like 3-on-3 like workouts here. Like the original timetable is 8 to 12 weeks to basketball activities. I think that was from like late September. What's your feel here? What's your prediction? He's traveling the team now. Do we see him? Are we going to see him before December? Are we going to see him on this West Coast trip? Like, what's your feel in terms of when he comes back at this point?
I think I was, operating under the assumption, I don't know how you felt, B-Rob, but I was thinking if Rob was back by January, I think the Celtics would have been pretty happy just because that way you would have had like adequate time. Like I was on the back end of the 8 to 12 week time frame. In January, like you can ease them back, but then you still have, 3.5 months of the regular season to really get your chemistry down. Like, right, like Rob still got to play with Malcolm Brogdon, for example. So just small things like that. I think, I don't know, like he could come back on that West Coast swing. That would be around mid-December. I personally think January, right? Like I just think January is still like a good shooting point, just because I think with Rob, like you just don't want a situation where he can re-aggravate that knee. And right, like everything in my opinion, in terms of like their finals hopes, I think is kind of contingent on Rob, because I think this is clearly like this team can go to the finals, win it all, but I think Rob is kind of that missing piece in terms of like even better dominance, I guess, because they do have one of the best net ratings in the league. But I think with Rob, you unlock the Celtics of last season. And who knows if that's sustainable in terms of blowing everybody out. Like that was kind of a crazy stretch that we saw. It was extremely easy writing gamers. Like who knows if that is, like who knows if they can replicate. Yeah, right. The last night wasn't too bad, I guess. Who knows if they can replicate that? I think that was kind of, a little bit flash in the pan, but I think the Celtics should be working toward that, because realistically, like you didn't even see that during the playoffs last year, just because Rob was hobbled, right? Like you saw flashes of it, but if Rob is fully healthy and the rest of the team is relatively healthy, right? Like this team, without Gallinari, like you can't say they're fully healthy based off the salary cap and the rosters and everything. But I think you're just trying to replicate that. So I just think January is still a good starting point. I think if he comes back earlier, then obviously then he's feeling good. It seems like the vibes are good with him. Like he's around the team a lot. Like I remember asking Joe in training camp, like, what's Rob able to do? And he was like, he's around like pretty much all the time. Like Kevin Gelle was like, Rob was giving me pointers on pick and roll coverages, stuff like that. So, clearly he's excited to come back. But I just think, right, like it's not worth him coming back like a week or two early if that affects the long term at all. And I think that's how everybody should feel, or everybody does feel, just because Rob is such a unique talent, right? Like we talk about Al being so important, but Rob is also just completely unlocked so many different things defensively.
Yeah, it's and to pile on to that point, starting 13-4 to the year, the sense of urgency is just down. I mean, the Celtics, if they stay healthy here, they should be not a lock for a top 2 seed in the East, but they're well on their way, since the top contenders to get those spots are really beaten up or have had their own problems right now, and they've got a lot of work to do to even do that. And the Celtics, while playing a road heavy schedule here, are out in front of the gate here. And not that the quality of their opponents have been tremendous during this stretch, and they have clearly a really tough trip coming up in December. But with Robb, it's like, well, you don't want him. I think you just want to save the wear and tear as much as possible. So if he's, just build him up slowly, like get him feeling like really, really good. And if he's feeling really, really good, then maybe give him another week then to make sure he's like, that. Like, I almost wonder, like, this won't happen. I wonder, like, it's like you send him, like, I don't know, I guess you could like send him to go practice with Maine and do like 5-on-5 there, because like they're not going to be practicing much with the Celtics, just because their schedule is so brutal these next. There's just very rarely even 2 days off in a row at any point. So I wonder how they handle that part of it when he does get super close to coming back to the floor.
Yeah, and I think great point in terms of the record. Like there's just no need or any urgency in terms of Robb coming back. And maybe that was part of the calculation in terms of the minutes, right? Like, hey, let's sprint out, fix the vibes, but also be like, hey, Robb, like you're good, man. Like don't need to rush back. Like let's take this nice and slow. So I think Celtics fans are rightfully excited about the possibility of Robb coming back. I mean, who can blame them? Like this team looks so good already, B-Rob, in terms of offensively, and the defense is getting better, but adding Robb, I think, will, like I said, like unlock that next level.
Yeah. So let's talk about the offense here before looking ahead into this next 6-game homestand that's starting on Wednesday night at the Garden with the Luka Tatum MVP battle here. So Celtics, they are down to second in offensive rating. Their metrics across the board are pretty spectacular. Their biggest one that sticks out, obviously, is their top and 3-point rate around the league right now, and third and 3-point shooting percentage at 39%. Does it feel right now to you that is sustainable based on the fact that, we know obviously the proven shooters like Grant Williams from last year, Hauser, we know this is report, but then you have guys like Derek White shooting 43% from 3. Al Horford, even after going 0 of 7 last night, is like still 42% from 3, which is still nuts. And like Brown and Tatum are just like middle of the road, 34% from 3. So it's like they're shooting anything crazy here. So I guess from that standpoint, I don't know why like this would necessarily slow down over the course of the year in terms of their averages, because even if the White and Horfords of the world go down, like Tatum and Brown could very well just shoot up.
Yeah. And I think this was, I feel like I've mentioned this a few times, but like this was kind of the theory, I guess, with the Derek White type, right? Like he didn't have the best shooting numbers in San Antonio. I think it was like right around 33%. But when they traded for him, I think, right, the theory was basically he's no longer like a top option on that offense. Like defenses aren't necessarily game planning for him. As a result, he's going to get open 3-pointers. And Joe Mazzulla talked about this after the Bulls loss when, they put up 53-pointers. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And Joe's like straight up like, well, if you're open, you should shoot, right? And like, this is the league. Like, and I think that's why it can't be sustainable, right? Like you said, like the percentages might go down for some guys, but those same percentages can go up for guys like Jason and Jalen who haven't had the greatest shooting starts. So I think when you watch the Celtics offense, like they take a lot of 3-pointers like to the noticeable amount. Like I think I tweeted it last night. Like they only made 1 2-point field goal in the first quarter, which I think is crazy. They made 6 total, and 5 of them were 3-pointers. So. But I think when you're watching this offense, like occasionally there would be bad 3-pointers. Like that's just going to happen over the course of the game. But for the most part, I think you're pretty comfortable with like the quality of 3-point looks they're getting. I think you could kind of dig into the numbers in terms of if they're open or not. But overall, like your shooters, if they're open, like Al went over 7, but like I didn't necessarily like he shot good open threes, and like if you're not going to shoot that, then like that completely changes your offense in terms of like the defense maybe doesn't need to respect your 3-point shot anymore, so they can stack the paint a little more, et cetera, a double team. So I think you feel great. You still have the number 2 offense in the league, and you play Sacramento, who is on fire. Good for. I'm a Kings fan, and they have seen a lot, B-Rob. Like they have been through a lot. Like they deserve this in terms of like, they got Clown for the Tyrese Halliburton trade, who looks great for Indiana, by the way. But hey, they look really good now. Sabonis is a good player. Like they kind of have a little something there. I feel good for them. But yeah, overall, like I don't think there are too many nitpicks. I guess, I think we're kind of past the point, I guess, where the narrative is basically shooting teams can't win in the playoffs after the great Warriors runs and everything. So I think you want them to have a little bit more balance, as Malcolm Brogdon said last night. Like I wrote about it. Basically, his point was if the threes aren't falling, it's not necessarily you just have to, go find stuff inside the arc. It's also don't let it affect their defense. And I think that's where maybe that's kind of the kryptonite for the Celtics. Like I get the frustrations of missing a bunch of like open look threes, but like that happens. It's an 82 game schedule, but you got to lock that on D. And the Celtics didn't do that last night, which is why they saw their win streak snap. So I think that's the number one thing I would personally be looking at if their shots aren't falling. If the shots are falling, then great. Then they're going to do what they did to the Hawks and Pelicans. But, in the Bulls game, that they did that affect their defense. And as a result, they gave up 121 points. So overall, though, you feel good, but just don't let it affect the defense, I think.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I'm sure it's easier for them to let down their guard during this winning streak when it's like, yeah, guess what? We've been, we're running, getting, outrunning and getting teams every single night. So it's like, what do we do here? Like, it's tough for us to kind of dig deep and get the stops that we were so reliant on last year to, win games, especially in the first half of the season. And so as far as and that's another part of the equation where Rob Williams could fit into. It's like, okay, how do you make yourself more offensively balanced? It's like, okay, how about we get one of the best lob guys in the league back? And so that way that's much more of a paint presence than we have right now for anyone on the team. Because while Tatum and Brown can get to the rim well, and even honestly, Malcolm Brogdon too, like he when he decides he wants to go into the paint for the night, he can really like tear it up down there, which is really encouraging to see because the Celtics really just haven't had a guard that can do that because that's generally one of Smart's weak spots. And, Derek White, from a size and a finishing standpoint isn't great there either. But the more you see him get comfortable in that spots and you add other elements to the offense, and it's like just having that awareness, like you talked about, to be like, okay, this is, we're not going to not stop taking threes, but we're going to make teams have to collapse on us even more down low. And so those threes get even more open when we want them there. And, or just we can say, hey, that shot's not falling tonight. Like, let's make a concerted effort to get down low a little more. So it's, again, like the situation they have here is they're set up. The offense is set up beautifully to do this. The personnel is there. So it's like, why this is a coach's dream right now. If you're Missoula and you have, where we can we love to shoot threes and we shoot them well. Like, great. We're not going to let one bad shooting half take us off that game plan.
Yeah, and just like last night, like I think they shot like 30.6% from three in the first half, and they finished the game shooting 38. Like those shots were going to fall. It's just that the Bulls scored 121 points, which is like you just can't have that. Even though they, I wrote about this last week, B-Rob, obviously on the defense, they have been improving. The shot profile is good, but the Bulls just, they just kept it coming. The turnovers were pretty bad for the Celtics last night. Jalen and Jason have been
they were horrendous last night. Jalen turnovers were like, ugh.
Yeah, like Jalen's had some pretty heavy turnover games recently, which I think is a little bit of a red flag. Jason included, but at least Jason's assist numbers are pretty high, whereas Jalen is not necessarily the case every night, but he has had a couple nice games. So yeah.
It's you want to avoid the Bulls in that play-in game scenario if you're the Celtics. the 1-8-2-7 against the Bulls, for whatever reason, you don't want to see DeRozan in the playoff series because for some reason, I think they take care of them, but it's just like DeRozan for whatever reason just likes to go off, and no one can really guard him well. At least in the regular season, that's like Smart can't really. He's got too much size and Smart, and then he just seems to get whatever he wants against anyone they throw at him.
I do wonder how much, I forgot what year it was, but I remember the Nets swept the LeBron Heat like 4-0 one year, and they met in like the second round of the playoffs, and that was like a big narrative point. And then I think the Heat swept them. So I wonder how much. That's
true.
Like that's like one of the ones, I don't even know how old I was, but that always stuck in my mind because it was very much so, wow. That was like the first moment I realized, like as an NBA fan, I was like, wow, the regular season really doesn't matter. So, obviously, the Celtics do have their issues against the Bulls. I do wonder what that would be like in a playoff scenario, but we can talk about that in April if that does happen.
The Bulls very well might not even be in that equation
very true.
based on the way they've started 7-10 and a crowded picture. They have like the Heat and other teams below them that could very well just have better teams overall once they get healthy here. All right, Souichi, let's wrap up here. Let's get into this homestand coming up. We got 6 games. At first, it wasn't a very impressive homestand in terms of quality of opponent. You had obviously Dallas coming in first, and then kind of a mishmash of teams before the Heat in a rare home and home to wrap it up. But suddenly, I mean, Luka's Luka for running up, and then the Kings are suddenly the hottest team in the NBA with the best offense in the NBA, as you alluded to earlier. What's expectations going into this, and what's an acceptable record for this group, knowing that this is maybe a little bit tougher of a homestand than you might have expected originally?
One, I expect Luka to hit a game-winning buzzer beater. On Wednesday. I don't know how. I haven't even been here 2 years, and I think I've watched like 3 of those already somehow.
It is nuts. Like, by the way, and it's almost like the same spot. He did the same spot in Dallas game, and then the Celtics and Mavs always play epic games in the regular season. It's fun.
I'm excited for Wednesday. If these 2 teams meet in the finals, like I think it's just like in it for like haymakers for 7 games, basically. I think in terms of record, I think 4-2 you would probably feel good against. Because you do play the Heat twice. The Heat haven't looked good, but it was just hard for me to watch to see them, I guess, drop 2 straight games against a team that beat you in 7 games on your home court last playoffs. Like I just think maybe Jimmy or someone goes off. Something like that. So I think 4-2 you feel comfortable with in terms of maybe you drop one of the Heat game, or one of the Heat games and one of Kings Mavs, but who knows? The Celtics team, like there have been multiple times this year when I thought they were gonna lose, and then like the Hawks game I thought was like perfect. Like the Hawks had just come off a win over the Bucks, emotional high. The Celtics were going to be shorthanded. It was going to be on the road, et cetera, et cetera. I know they just blew them out. I thought the same way about the Pelicans game. The Dion wasn't playing. So I think, who knows, maybe they go 6-0, 5-1. But I think at least 4-2 you feel good against. Like Washington and Charlotte, I know it's a back-to-back, but like those are simply games you have to take care of. And then in terms of Dallas, Sacramento, Miami twice, I think if you split those, you'll feel pretty happy. Weird schedule coming up though is what, the 6-game homestand, the 6-game road trip, and what is this, like a 7-game homestand to end the year? So
absolutely wow.
I don't understand. And a 7-game homestand to end the year isn't exactly full of marquee opponents either, so it's kind of weird a little bit. But I think 4-2 though is a good starting point. Don't know if they get there. I think they pretty easily get there, but who knows? Maybe Rui Hachimura, fellow Japanese guy, goes up for 50 points or something like that. So who's to say? It is at the NBA after all.
It is. The Wizards are surprisingly okay this year. I mean, they're in the middle of the East playoff team. I mean, this also happened last year too, and then they fell off a cliff.
Well, I don't know. They looked pretty good. We were like, I forgot what it was. They were pretty good for like 10 games or something. Right. But yeah. So who knows what ends up happening to them? But maybe if Beal stays healthy, they'll kind of be in that playing contention.
Yeah, Porzingis is staying healthy.
The Pacers
helps. Pacers look like just fun. I mean, the Wizards, if you look at their metrics, they're 10-7, but their expected win loss is 8-9. So they've maybe gotten lucky in some close games and stuff like that. But the Pacers, I mean, they're
top 10 net rating.
Top 10 net rating right now. They're 10-6. That has to obviously easily the surprise of the NBA at this point, since that's the team that everyone expected to be in the bottom 5 or 6 years. And we have to talk about Aaron Nesmith's near disaster. Poor guy leads the comeback, or doesn't lead a comeback, but scores the last points of the game to lead a Pacers comeback win, and then gets the surprise. And I don't know, it's a situation. I don't know if go watch the clip if you haven't seen it yet, but he has the walk-off interview, and he gets surprised by his Pacer teammates who dump water on, like a classic situation. But for whatever reason, this like totally throws Nesmith for a loop, probably because again he hasn't been a walk-off interview a lot, and so he doesn't know what to do. So he tries to run away from the cups of water being thrown on him, and proceeds to slips and has like almost looks like it could have been like a hamstring tear based on how he went down. He's okay, but like poor guy, that would have been just like the story of his like life right now. Of like, but no, he's playing there, and it's good to see him getting some minutes, and and that's I don't know, that's a fun team over there right now.
Yeah, Benedict Mathurin leading the way for my fantasy team. Tyrese Halliburton is still a lot of fun. I'm sure like Kings fans aren't that mad because they have the number one offense right now. They look hot. But Tyrese Halliburton, pretty good player. Who would have thought? I mean, everyone, but you know, that's okay. But yeah, they have. I mean, I always thought they had the pieces, so it's kind of fun to see. You know, one of these low key, younger-ish team kind of have a little bit. I don't think it'll last, but who's to say? Maybe they end up being like last year's Raptors, who were kind of inexplicably the 5 seed. So
yeah, no, there's always some team always emerges from the woodwork as a surprise in these regular seasons, and it's still if the Pacers. We'll see if they want to. They obviously have some pieces to sell down the line, but like the Jazz in the West right now, it's like, oh well, if we're actually can show by the numbers that we're legitimately good, then we're not going to be able to tank far enough anyway for it to matter at this point. So why not, just roll for what we got. So, but that's a storyline for down the road for both those teams. It'll be, I don't think the Celtics don't play Utah for a while. I feel like, right? Like they don't play them until second half of the season. So we won't get the Will Hardy return game or the Kelly Olynyk return game for a while here on that front. But all right, any closing thoughts here heading into this? We're going 4-2 here. I'm going to go 5-1. I think it's just you lose one of the Dallas or the Heat game, and I think Sacramento on the road. I just don't expect them. Like they're a scary team at home. I feel like at this point, but I don't expect them to come. And I also feel like their record at the Garden over the last 10 years is probably like 1-9 or 0-10. So they're like one of these cursed teams when it comes to playing against East.
Well, I mean, they got just walloped by the Celtics twice last year, I remember, in Sacramento. Yeah. And the Boston one was just bad. I just felt like everyone sucked on that team. I was like, oh, my God, right? Like, you don't watch the Kings that often. So you're like, oh, my goodness. Like, what are we – I thought Tyrese Halliburton sucked based off that one game. Then he came with the Pacers. He had, like, a triple-double in, like, 20 minutes because of foul trouble. So I was like, okay, maybe it was just the Kings, so maybe I should watch the Kings more. It's my takeaway here. But, yeah, 5-1 seems fair. Only last thought is I'm curious to see what Joe Mazzulla does with the rotation. I don't want to open this can of worms, but with Payton Pritchard just because he played so well. But yeah, that's just something I'm keeping an eye on. He didn't play it Monday. I think he can find a path for playing time for him, especially with back-to-backs coming up. But I'm curious. I'm just curious to see what happens. Like people were in my mentions being like, "Do you think he earns a rotation spot?" I'm like, no, because Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, and Marcus Smart are really that good. But
that's another thing where it's like if Al Horford is playing, can you take 5 minutes from Al Horford and give him to Payton Pritchard? Just play small.
Yeah. Just can Payton Pritchard find 12 minutes a game? That's all I'm asking. I'm just curious. I'm not saying anything. I'm just wondering if that will happen. And I think a lot of fans will be happy just because the cheers this man gets at TD Garden is truly next level. And I'm very intrigued to see what happens there.
He's ever since training camp 2 years ago or whatever, when even guys like Marcus Smart in training camp were like, yeah, no, Payton's like, he can play. And he was the one, like, out of all those young guys, he was the one, obviously Grant Williams too, but he was around for a year before. But those are the two out of a very, very big net of young guys that emerged from the pack and have remained fan favorites here. So, but I think it's a really good point to see, both from a trade value perspective and just, keeping him engaged, keeping minutes down elsewhere. Like, I think he's clearly done enough to find 10 minutes a game, but we'll see if they find it for him here. All right. That's it for us. Make sure, again, you're following Souichi on Twitter for all the Celtics takes and World Cup takes this week. And rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Plays podcast. Check out all our coverage on Mass Live as well. And we will talk to you guys after the holiday later this week.